I'm especially mindful today of the memory of those who we lost on September 11th, their family members and their loved ones who, till this very minute, grieve for those who were sacrificed in the terrible attacks we suffered on September 11th. We have learned something today that raises a number of serious questions. We have learned that President Bush had been informed last year, before September 11th, of a possible plot by those associated with Osama bin Laden to hijack a U.S. airliner. The White House says that the President took all appropriate steps in reaction to that warning. The White House further says that the warning did not include any specific information, such as which airline, which date, or the fact that a hijacked plane would be used as a missile. Now, those are all very important issues, worthy of exploration by the relevant committees of Congress. And the goal of such an examination should not be to assign blame, but to find out all of the facts. I also support the effort by Senators Lieberman and McCain to establish an independent National Commission on Terrorist Attacks upon the United States. That was reported out of the Senate Governmental Affairs Committee in March. Such a panel can help assure the people of New York and America that every facet of this national tragedy will be fully examined, in hopes that the lessons we learn can prevent disasters in the future. I very much appreciated the remarks by Senator Lieberman on the floor earlier today, indicating his desire to offer this proposal that he and Senator McCain have put forth as an amendment at the earliest possible time. Because we must do all we can to learn the hard lessons of experience from our past and apply them to safeguard our future. That's why I also support the call by this distinguished Majority Leader, Mr. Daschle, for the release of the Phoenix FBI memorandum and the August intelligence briefing to congressional investigators, because, as Senator Daschle said this morning, the American people need to get the facts. Now, Mr. President, I do know some things about the unique challenges faced by the person who assumes the mantle of Commander-in-Chief. And I don't for a minute doubt that any individual who holds that responsibility is the only person who can truly know the full scope of the burdens of that office. Just the other day, there was a survey about the most difficult job in America, the most stressful position. And it shouldn't come as any surprise that President of the United States ranked at the top. I've had the privilege of witnessing history up close, and I know there is never any shortage of second-guessers and Monday morning quarterbacks ready to dismantle any comment or critique any action taken or not taken. Having experienced that from the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue, I, for one, will not play that game, especially in these circumstances. I am simply here today, on the floor of this hallowed chamber, to seek answers to the questions being asked by my constituents. Questions raised by one of our newspapers in New York with the headline, "Bush knew." The President knew what? My constituents would like to know the answer to that and many other questions. Not to blame the President or any other American, but just to know, to learn from experience, to do all that we can today to ensure that a 9/11 never happens again. Because if we look back, we know that the Phoenix FBI memorandum in early July raised very specific issues about certain people of Arabic heritage who were taking flying lessons. For what purpose? To do what? We know that shortly after, there was at least the news report of the Attorney General sending a directive that people in the Justice Department should no longer fly commercially, and in fact, the Attorney General took a chartered plane for his own vacation. We know that in August, additional information came forward, including what we learned today about the intelligence briefing provided to the President. You know, the pain of 9/11 is revisited in thousands of homes in New York and around our country every time that terrible scene of those planes going into those towers and then their collapse appears on television. It's revisited in our minds every time we see a picture of the cleanup at Ground Zero. It's revisited every time the remains of a fallen hero are recovered, as they were yesterday for Deputy Chief Downey. And it is revisited today with the questions about what might have been had the pieces of the puzzle been put together in a different way before that sad and tragic day in September. I cannot answer the questions that my constituents are asking. I cannot answer the concerns raised by the families of the victims. As agonizing as it is even to think that there was intelligence suggesting the possibility of the tragedy that occurred, particularly for the family members who lost their husband and their wife, their son, their daughter, their niece, their nephew, their mother, their father. It is a subject that we are absolutely required to explore. As for the President, he may not be in a position at this time to respond to all of those concerns, but he is in a position to answer some of them, including the question of why we know today, May 16th, about the warning he received. Why did we not know this on April 16th or March 16th or February or January 16th or August 16th of last year? And I do hope and trust that the President will assume the duty that we know he is capable of fulfilling, exercise the leadership that we know he has, and come before the American people at the earliest possible time to answer the questions so many New Yorkers and Americans are asking. That will be a very great help to all of us. And I know that my constituents, particularly the families who still today wonder why their loved one went to work that beautiful September morning and didn't come home from the World Trade Center or the Pentagon or those airplane flights. After all, in the grieving process, it's often the not knowing that hurts the most. Mr. President, I hope that the President will address these issues, will do so as soon as possible, and will also authorize the release of any other information that New Yorkers and Americans have a right to know. I certainly look forward to learning myself and being able to share that information with the people I represent. Thank you, and I yield back the floor.
President.
Senator from Connecticut.
Mr. President, I have some remarks on another subject I'd like to make, but let me just briefly commend our colleague and friend from New York for her comments and her remarks, and I want to associate myself with them. I think all Americans would. Obviously, it's going to be critically important that we know all that we possibly can that occurred, and if there was, in fact, information which we should have been acted on. It's critically important we know about that and what happened and why actions were not taken, so that we minimize the possibility of an event such as occurred on September 11th occurring again. We all realize, as the colleague and friend of ours from New York has pointed out, this is a difficult job of being the chief executive officer of this country, the commander-in-chief. And there is a voluminous amount of material that arrives every day from our national security agencies and services. But when you get information this specific, this detailed, arriving from a variety of different sources, then someone should have taken better action, in my view. And so I am hopeful we'll get the kind of response. It's critically important for the healing process and for understanding exactly what occurred. So I commend her for her remarks and associate myself.